I think that there has to be a demonstrated set of actions that the president and probably only the president can do. And some of those are things like saying, and I'll use it as an example. I don't know what direction he's going to take yet when it comes to this. Let's just talk about the FBI as an example. A demonstrated action is to put chains on the doors on Friday afternoon of the inauguration, and park security, even if you had to bring military, National Guard, but Marshal Service, park them around the building, all of the entrances, and nobody, and the president stands there. So, and the president of the United States, Trump, instead of going to his office in the White House, stops at because he's the president now, he stops at the Hoover building as they're coming down, Pennsylvania Avenue, and he stands there and he holds a quick press conference and says, "You see this building behind me? It's never going to ruin your life again. They're done. It's being closed as of now. I'm locking the doors." I mean, there's got to be a demonstrated action.
We have a very special guest, General Michael Flynn. We were just talking before this started about this period of time we're in and its historical context. And Mike, you brought up a couple eras in history. It was about Alexander the Great. And in the legend of Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot, it was this impossible knot that no one could untie, but the person who would rule all of Asia, I think was the idea. Yeah. And it seems to me that the administrative state in the U.S. today is the modern equivalent of the Gordian knot. Like, you can't get at it in any conventional way. So I wonder, the way Alexander got through it, obviously people probably know the stories, but it took bold and very unconventional action. I just wonder, what is the bold and unconventional action to break through the administrative state Gordian knot?
Yeah. So, and first of all, thank you guys for having me on your show. And I know we talked about doing a longer show at some point in time. So I hope we're able to pull that off for both you guys as well as your audience, because I do have immense, confidence in your audience that, because of the types of things that you guys cover. So, and I think that their expectation is always, more, especially if they think it's an interesting subject. And this particular subject, I think, is fascinating because, if you think about the great captains of history, the great leaders of history that we still talk about. I mean, you just mentioned, Peter, and there's others throughout history that are memorable because they took extraordinary risk during extraordinary times. And some of those times they created some of those conditions, and that's a part of human history. I think where we are right now, where this administration is right now, and I'm talking about I love, I think it was Doug that said, Bidenistas. I love that word, Bidenistas. I'm going to use that from now on. So this administration is being led by an individual who was declared to be generally incompetent by a special counsel by the name of Hur. Okay, so people can go back and look at that, H-U-R. So he his memory wasn't that great, right? Talking about the president of the United States of America. So we're in a place right now where this will not be a peaceful transfer of power. This is not going to be a peaceful transfer of power, even though Biden said it, even though Obama said it to Trump back in 2016, and Biden just said it to Trump last Wednesday. Do not count for 1 second that this is going to be a peaceful transfer of power. In the last 24 hours, there are reports of at least 6 of these high, very offensive capabilities, these ATACMS missiles that were fired from Ukraine soil into Russian soil. These are offensive weapons, and the only way that these weapons can be used is by applying a satellite capability for the targeting, the precision targeting that is necessary. So that satellite capability comes from either NATO or directly from the United States. The only way to actually fire these weapons is by having people who are the likelihood of them being Ukrainian is very low. So that's a tactical example of something that could immediately take us into World War III. Putin has already come out with a statement yesterday, he came out with a statement prior to this firing, where essentially Putin is talking about the conditions will change if, in fact, these weapon systems are used, meaning that the strategic conditions will change overnight if these weapons are used. So they've been used. Now we have to wait and see what's going to happen in terms of the give and take of warfare, physical warfare between Russia and the West. And I'll just say, the West principally being the United States of America. So we have a president of the United States that probably should receive what we call here in the United States the 25th Amendment. And Harris should immediately take that action. And I'm not saying this, just to say it. I'm saying it very precisely. And then it's up to her to show whether or not she actually is competent enough to be able to handle this, dramatic situation for a short period of time. The people inside of the Trump orbit, so what they need to start doing, and Trump can actually do this, and I mentioned this to you guys on the prior to coming on, during the 26 period of time, there was a whole range of circumstances. And one of the things that I got caught up in, and I was absolutely in my right to do it. I spoke with the Russian ambassador at the time because there was very high tension being created by the outgoing administration, in this case, Obama. When after he said we're going to have the smooth transition of power, we did not. And I was able to de-escalate a very dramatic situation because of my relationship with the Russian ambassador, and then of course him relaying it back to Putin, and the response back was okay, we're going to wait until Trump gets into office to be able to have a more reasonable conversation. Well, I think that President-elect Trump, he may have to take things into his own hands because the American people just gave him a mandate for peace. One of the things that Trump said during the campaign was he wanted to end the killing in Ukraine. So Trump actually has a responsibility not to act as the president, but to act as a person who is going to be coming into office very soon and make that phone call to say, hey, look, and that's not just to Putin, who he has a relationship with, but that's to Xi, who he has a relationship with, and other world leaders, Orban and others, even people in South America. Milei, he got the president of Paraguay. I mean, you have other international leaders, and I think that we still have a conference going on down in South America right now. So there's got to be sort of cool heads prevail time, because what we're seeing decision making by the bureaucratic deep state in Washington, D.C., not the White House. Biden is incapable. It is undeniable. He's incapable of making these types of decisions that we just heard, we just saw occur in the last, frankly, from Sunday until the overnight firing of these ATACMs. So you have a bureaucratic deep state inside that are making decisions, and frankly, it's probably emanating from places like the CIA. So, and I've said very publicly, guys, that I think that John Brennan is sort of the tactical pointy end of the spear here for this bureaucratic deep state, and he's not even in the government right now. So all that said, Matt Gaetz is the designated incoming Attorney General for the United States of America for the Trump administration. Matt Gaetz will likely become the Attorney General, and Trump has every authority, every constitutional privilege and right to be able to appoint Matt Gaetz in one of these, what they call recess type appointments. He can clearly do that, and Matt can actually sit in that position for close to, damn near, 400, I think it's 420 days or something like that. There's a 215-day rule, and then there's an extension that he can stay there if the dummies in the Senate don't confirm him. So Matt Gaetz ought to put the word out to those in the Department of Justice to hold on all communications that had anything to do with this very provocative, offensive event that was promulgated by the West, whether it's NATO, whether it's the United States, but hold on all those communications. We want all communications with anybody in the United States government between, between point A and point B that have to do with this issue. And we want all the communications that go over to Ukraine. hold on to all of it, because if you don't, we're going to come after you. There has to be a consequence for people that are making these decisions that are not in the authority to do these things. The third thing is Congress, Speaker Johnson should immediately move to impeach Biden, because the impeachment clause basically talks about high crimes and misdemeanors, right? Trump was impeached because he said the 2020 election was stolen. Trump was impeached because he had a perfectly good phone call to Ukraine. Twice they tried to impeach him. So this is a case of, and again, it's undeniable, provocative, offensive action. And the Speaker Johnson has a responsibility to sit there with his leadership and say, what do we do here? And they should move to impeach immediately if the 25th Amendment isn't invoked by Vice President Harris. And that move to impeach, is a very real, he is basically taking the nation to war. So when you think about what's the high crime, what's the misdemeanor, Biden is taking the nation potentially to World War III without a declaration of war by the United States Congress. Now, people can go, well, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been going overseas for a long time without a declaration of war. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. That is in our system that we're supposed to do that. So the nation then, takes responsibility for this and not just the president, right? So those are just a couple of things that I believe have to happen in this here and now. Going forward, President Trump is going to have his hands full because, despite what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are responsible for this, they call it the DOGE, right? The Department of Government Efficiency, I guess. Number one, there will be, there should be no new departments created. What they really have is they have a directive by President-elect Trump to find places in our government that we, like Milei did. Milei, I love his afuera, right? That was great. He did it kind of in a comedic way, but he did it in a very purposeful, precise way, as the incoming leader. And to me, as I've watched Argentina, I've watched Argentina actually begin to show some blossoming, right? Like a dead plant, which was dead from communism for 100 years. I've seen some blossoming in places like Argentina, like a new flower come into life, because he is taking capitalism to another level that can actually help a country economically, and frankly, to a degree, morally ascend. And in this case, Trump is going to have his hands full to fill the coffers of the parts of the administration that do survive, because there has to be a reckoning with parts of our government, of our U.S. government, that must be eliminated. And I've been a very big proponent for years of getting rid of, like, the Department of Education. It's a wasteland. I'm sure that there's good, secretarial staff, and I'm sure that they're competent people. But when you get up into the higher echelons of that organization, they've been ruining our education system in this country for, basically going back to the late 1970s, when Jimmy Carter stood it up. So there's a lot that is an example of the kinds of things that an Elon and a Vivek are going to have to look at. Never mind, those are whole cloth institutional structures that must be removed and taken down. But there's also going to have to be some decisions about people and about budgets, right? And how can you shift budgets from one budget line to another? And where do budgets exist? Most people, Bobby Kennedy is learning, and he knows, Bobby Kennedy is learning that the Health and Human Services actually has a budget almost twice the size of the Department of Defense, folks, okay, for your audience. That blows people away, right? You're talking in the trillions of dollars a budget. So Bobby Kennedy's going to have to look at some of these things, as well as like a Pete Hegseth going into the Department of Defense, which has never passed an audit. I think what they just said, a week ago, 9 years or whatever. I know inside of the Department of Defense, and these are these are things that the incoming administration is going to have to deal with, because you either decide to keep these things running, or you stop them and you shut them down. You shut them down whole cloth. But inside the Department of Defense, there's 16 different agencies and activities. I ran one of them, the Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the largest intel agencies in the world. But that was just one agency inside of a Department of Defense that has about 16 of those. Now, some of those are smaller, like our commissary agency, where people go and buy on military bases, where they buy food, right? Or you have a logistics agency, which is actually a pretty large body of people. And then you have all of the services. So this is just inside the Department of Defense. So there's going to have to be a reckoning, because everybody goes, oh, we can't touch our military. We got to give our military more money, and we got to make them stronger. If you give the military one more dollar, it's not going to make them any stronger. If you give them another $1 trillion, it's not going to make them stronger. One of the most important things for Trump to do, and I know I'm going long on your question, but I'm on a roll, and I want to get these points across, because your real question is, does Trump have the guts to do the things that need to be done, as Peter the Great did, or Alexander the Great, or any of these great captains in time? Does he have the guts to make the calls to be able to achieve the things that he needs to achieve, right? I believe that he does. I believe, from what I have seen him say since the election, that he is really looking hard at taking the actions that are necessary. And one of the things that has to change from the top down, and certainly in all these different organizations, is the culture. When you take, and I've taken over a lot of organizations, I've led organizations from 30 to almost 30,000. So when you take over an organization, one of the things that you examine is the culture of the organization. Is it a disciplined culture? Is it a warfighting culture? Is it a lazy culture? Do they not understand what the standards are? I mean, so the culture of the organization has everything to do with the attitude and the way that an organization functions and operates, right? And so all of our institutions right now inside of the government have this woke mentality, this woke culture, and it was basically, intubated inside of the government by Obama. Trump was really not able to change it as much as I think he would have liked to have changed it, and it resulted in him, not getting elected in 2020, and we can argue that, and then for 4 years being persecuted by the court systems, but coming back like a Napoleon or like a Caesar, right? He came back, and he's going to stand the test of time, and talk about a historic figure. But does he have the necessary courage to be able to stand there and say, okay, I understand forgiveness, but I also understand accountability. And I believe, now I'm speaking for Mike Flynn, I believe that accountability must occur, because without accountability, 4 years from now or 10 years from now, people will attempt the same things over and over and over, and they'll continue to get away with it as long as they see that no one is held accountable. And I'm not talking about some little minion, low-level, government bureaucrat. I'm talking about people at the highest levels of our, that have been in charge of very, very high levels of our government. And that also includes up to and including the executive office of the President of the United States of America. So accountability has to happen as reform is occurring. And that's where I want to see Trump's inner strength come out of him, because the people around him, they're going to make decisions about, which direction to move a new, whatever organization they're responsible for, a Hegseth or a Tulsi Gabbard or a Matt Gaetz. They got to move these organizations forward, but do they have the authority? I don't want them to look over their shoulders and wonder if Trump is waiting to see what they do. I want Trump to say, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I expect you to achieve. If you need my help, you come back and you let me know. But I expect you to do the following things. And man, you give me that kind of guidance and, Katie bar the door, and you'll have a very effective organization in a relatively short period of time. So I'll pause there, because I know that was a long answer.
Speaking of that, I really loved your comment on X a while ago, where there was a very smarmy and slick female DOD executive who was being interviewed by Jon Stewart. And it was amazing how she dodged and slithered around the question that he asked. And I think this is typical of the bureaucracies that we have in the government. But do you think that it could possibly be changed? Because let's take Johnson, who impresses me, frankly, is something of a nothing nobody. Wouldn't you say, having run one of these 17 Praetorian agencies in the government, that they have or could have so much dirt on him that he wouldn't dare do anything to change things, or they would unleash the hounds of hell on him? Now, isn't that the way it's going to work?
Yeah, and it does work like that in Washington, D.C. And it works like that, when it comes to anybody that's that's been hanging around Washington and floating back and forth in between administrations, whether they stay there and, in some K Street lobby group or a law firm, and then they go back into the Democrat regime or the Republican regime. Definitely throughout the legislative branches, all members of Congress, the House and the Senate, and then all judges fall into this trap. So the person that you mentioned that I highlighted the other day was the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the number two person. She was the number two. She is the number two person in the Department of Defense, of $1 trillion organization that has not been able to pass audits for years. And she basically, her response showed the American people that she was so out of touch with what the American people expect. For example, I have been audited twice in my life by the IRS while I was serving in the military, actually. And then I've gone through other audits in my civilian capacity now, running different organizations because I'm a conservative. So when I go through an audit, if I don't pass the audit, the IRS comes in and charges me some additional monies, or maybe they'll come after me for other reasons. But yet the Department of Defense has not been able to pass an audit, and I think it's like 9 years or something like that. It's an incredible amount of time.
Well, we all remember when Rumsfeld said it's $2.3 billion, trillion dollars that we can't track, and that was a long time ago. I'm sure it's
well, no, it's the same thing. He said that on the 10th of September of 2001, the day before the Twin Towers were hit, by the way. So, timing is everything. So but her attitude is the attitude that we are dealing with when I talk about culture and culture in these organizations in Washington, D.C. That culture, that attitude has to be like a metastasized cancer of the throat. It's got to be excised out, and then a purification, has to, and these, the deep state people in the media, the big media, they're gonna go crazy. They hear me use the word purification. Now, the cleansing of what we must do to get rid of this attitude. We have to get rid of this attitude. And I can tell you from the uniformed military side of things, that's actually not that difficult to do. It's going to take some time, but it's not that difficult to do. On the civilian side, those that are appointed officials inside of the executive branch of the government, whether it's Department of Defense or Department of Commerce or Department of Agriculture, this attitude of wokeness, this attitude of mediocrity has got to be eliminated. And we don't need that many people in the government. The federal government doesn't. I am so looking forward to how President Trump deals with taxes, right? Federal taxes, because he's talked about different ideas about eliminating federal taxes. That and then going with a sort of a tariff-based payment system, right? We'll see what he's able to achieve, and I know he's looking at some really smart people to bring in to help him work through that, particularly Treasury, and I think Commerce is another big one that does require somebody that has that kind of a mind.
Well, wouldn't you say that Commerce is another agency that should be abolished,
Yeah.
frankly, not just education, which everybody's
Yep.
talking about, but the Department of Agriculture, which employs 100,000 people to make farmers' lives miserable. But the point I'd make, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, it's that replacing the terrible people that are there now, these Jacobins actually that control Washington and everything in the Beltway, and replacing them with good people, I think that's actually kind of counterproductive and firing people. Why? It's like trimming a noxious plant. When you trim it, it just grows back stronger. You've got to pull it out by the roots and sow Agent Orange where it grew. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. Do you think they'll be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big $64,000 question, Doug. And I think that there has to be a demonstrated set of actions that the president and probably only the president can do. And some of those are things like saying, and I'll use it as an example. I don't know what direction he's going to take yet when it comes to this. Let's just talk about the FBI as an example. I mean, we mentioned the Department of Education, and Trump has already talked about that. But a demonstration of action to remove something, I mean, literally to pull it right out of the ground by the roots, right? Not like you say, get in there and trim the dead branches off of it and 4 years from now or 10 years from now, it comes back and it's worse, right? To go there, a demonstrated action is to put chains on the doors, on Friday afternoon of the inauguration, and park security, even if you had to bring military, National Guard, but Marshal Service, park them around the building, all of the entrances, and nobody, the president stands there. So, and the president of the United States, Trump, instead of going to his office in the White House, stops at because he's the president now, he stops at the Hoover building as they're coming down, Pennsylvania Avenue, and he stands there and he holds a quick press conference and says, you see this building behind me? It's never going to ruin your life again. They're done. It's being closed as of now. I'm locking the doors, whatever, right? I mean, there's got to be a demonstrated action. And like I said, back to, I think it was Matt's question earlier about, are we willing to take these steps, right? I mean, you had great time, you had these momentous times in history, and these great captains rose to those momentous times, and they changed the world. They actually changed the direction of the world. If Trump doesn't take these types of actions, I'm not sure if we're going to change the direction, and course correct us back to a time that, and I'm not talking about going backwards in time. I'm talking about to a place where we can live on a planet where the United States of America continues to thrive and be a humble nation, but be a nation of innovators, of wealth producers, of idea makers and creators. I mean, that's what the United States is very capable of still doing with the right leadership and the right culture, the right attitude. And if Trump doesn't take these kinds of extraordinary actions, I'm afraid that what will happen is the bureaucracy, like they typically do, and I know because they did this, they tried to do this with me, and in some cases they succeeded. You would tell somebody, you'd go, okay, I want your part of the agency, I want it eliminated, right? And I want it eliminated by Monday. And so what they would do is they would come back to you on Monday with a white paper like this. They come back to you with a white paper and all the reasons why they can't do it. And you're like, well, that's not what I asked you for. I don't want the white paper. I want the door shut. So now I got to go do it myself. And I would sit there, and I did this a couple of elements within the Defense Intelligence Agency. To this day, and I'll a point of pride for me, and I don't normally talk like this, but I reformed that agency into centers, what's called centers, to be more downward looking to support warfighting commands out in the battlefield, right? And that was at a time when it was 2012, we were still at war. And that center concept has stayed in place till this day, because it is a downward focused linkage to the people that we were supposed to support, instead of this upward looking organization that I got that was kissing the rear end of the CIA and the White House and the DNI, right? I didn't care about that. What I cared about was We had elements in our military and in our country that were at war. We had great capabilities, and I wanted to focus down and in. And until this day, that structure still exists. The attitude is not quite there, but the structure exists, because when you recreate a government structure, you have to do it two ways. It's not just, a good idea that you just, you move some desks around and a couple of line and blocks. You got to change the human resources system, which I did, and I made it more of an upward mobility type thing instead of a lot of people at the top and very few at the bottom. And then you also got to look at the budgetary processes to move monies from one line over to another and then make it permanent. And those are two ways to do that. And frankly, I would have shut down half of DIA if I could, but you're at the time, I'm not in a position where, you got the Secretary of Defense, Panetta, and the Director of National Intelligence, Clapper, and they were like, no, we can't do that. We're not going to do that. But you do what you think you need to do. And they allowed me to do it. They gave me great flexibility to do the things I needed to do. But now we're talking about, the entire governmental level, as well as some institutions that do tie into the government, meaning like the banking institution, educational institutions, right? Colleges and universities that get.
Oh, I can imagine how hard it would be, because you remember that ex-football player, Jack Kemp, who was appointed head of HUD during the Reagan years.
Yep.
And his mandate was to cut it back, actually eliminate it,
Right.
which should have been done, but to show how competent he was and how strong, and he actually doubled the size of the damned agency.
Yeah.
Right in front of everybody's eyes. So this is a real danger. I mean, the DIA, which you used to run, it's one of 17 intelligence agencies. Do we need 17 intelligence agencies? Because you're an intelligence guy, and
yeah, no, and no. So let me jump, because I'm going to run out of time here, and I appreciate it. And like we talked about earlier, maybe we figure out a way to get me down there for a longer format. So, and just one of the issues with 17 agencies is every single one of them has their own communications system, and every single one of those communication systems are multi-billion-dollar systems. I mean, you're talking about everything. The box, the box itself, the wiring, the naming conventions, how they function, what they're tied into. It is utter insanity. And I can tell you that some of those agencies have multiple communications inside. So yeah. So do you need 17? No, you do not need 17. Do you need 17 or at least 20, maybe 25 different communication systems that are probably on average, every single one of them is probably around somewhere between $1 to $4 billion they'd cost, okay, average, okay, per. So, I mean, the insanity of what we allowed from 9/11, the Patriot Act, the growth of the intelligence community, and yet the enemies around the world were actually diminishing. They were really diminishing at the time. And what we have done is we've grown and we've essentially grown into a very incompetent intelligence community, extremely incompetent intelligence community. We have gotten almost nothing right at the strategic level. Nothing.
You're right.
I mean,
absolutely nothing.
Yeah. I mean, there's tactical successes here and there, but at the strategic level, we've gotten nothing right. And so, yeah, so that there has to be extraordinary reform. And this is something that I know Tulsi Gabbard, it's going to be difficult. She's going to have to really consider how, because you can't just go in the high offices of the Director of National Intelligence, which I spent a year there as assistant director, and you can't just go up there and have a nice office and look out your window and feel good about yourself. No, this is really hard work, and the hard work I know has already begun, but there is going to have to be reform. And like I said about President Trump, for him to close the FBI down, the American people would be cheering. You'll hear the cheers from the American people if he closes the FBI down. And there's a lot of second order effects. I mean, I think it was G.K. Chesterton said, be careful when you take a fence down because it was put up, it was the reason why it was put up in the first place. So you just got to understand the consequences when you do something. And then you have to accept those consequences. Back to the earlier question about, does Trump, does he got the courage? Does he have the courage to do the things that are necessary? Sitting here today, I believe he does. But there is going to be so much inertia directed against him to keep him from doing what is necessary. Everybody around him, even a lot of the Republicans, a lot of the establishment are going to tell him, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And frankly, it's the first person that comes to you that says you can't do something, they're on the other side. I hesitate to say they're your enemy, but damn, they're close to being your enemy. So understand that if somebody comes to you and says, Mr. President, you really can't do this, and they don't have a damn good reason why, we need them. Okay, now you go back and you follow the money trail. You go back and you follow the money trail. And those are the people to me, and that's why I like Matt Gaetz's attitude. I mean, there's going to have to be lawfully done investigations, but they have to be done quickly. And I will tell you, because I've been accused of knowing where the bodies are buried, right? So part of that accusation of knowing where the bodies are buried is knowing which place to look for the communications that I know were had between people. And some of those have to do with budgeting authorities that, yes, they come from Congress, but there's probably less than this many people, less than a handful, that really know anything about those budgets. And I'm talking about budgets that are in the hundreds of billions of dollars level that nobody pays any attention to. Okay, so that I know for a fact, and those are the things
it's obvious. And the way you're talking, Mike, it's music to our ears. It seems to me the U.S. government at this point is like a 100-story building about to collapse. And you can either let it collapse randomly and unpredictably, or you can have a controlled demolition of it. And it's got to be one or the other. I'm for the controlled demolition. Now, is there any chance that you'll be able to join this party with the new Trump administration?
Yeah, there's a chance, but it's not necessarily. I think where I'm at right now with everybody is in a good place, and I definitely will help. I understand the direction and the strategy that Trump is taking. I agree with it. Not necessarily every single piece of it, but the more important thing right now is to kind of what I call, and it's a military term, you organize for combat, right? And actually the more specific phrase is you task organize for combat. And when you task organize for combat, that means that you go and look at the people that you're going to need on your team, and then you look at the resources that you're going to have to use immediately, because once you make contact with the enemy, and believe me, they are already engaged. But once you make even greater contact with the enemy, once you're at the line of departure, which is really the day he takes the oath of office, if it's a smooth transition of power, then war will have to be waged. And I say that metaphorically for the crazy mainstream media that will take it and say, Flynn wants to go to war. No, it's a metaphor for saying there is going to be great difficulties once the line of departure is crossed by this new Trump administration, because right now, trying to get anything out of your counterparts in the various agencies, activities, departments, and commissions is damn near impossible. And Biden just sat with Trump last Wednesday and told him smooth transition of power, and we're firing offensive, provocative weapons into Russia today. So those two don't connect. That is undeniable that these things have occurred. So these are not made up things. So it's kind of like, okay, so where are we at? I mean, I would, if I were, and I said this last night to some, to some folks, Trump ought to be calling up Joe Biden going, hey, Joe, are you all there? Because, if you're not, then you need to, we need to do something else here. Something is not going to, Putin has got to, he has got to take some responsibility, for his own sovereignty, his own protection. I mean, it's not the Kremlin that provoked this. It's the White House that has.
You're quite correct. And nobody says that these days. You're absolutely right. But if Biden stepped down or was impeached, he'd be replaced by Kamala. And
yeah,
she's even more dangerous.
So that's okay. That's okay. That's okay for a period of time. So let's give her that and see what she's willing to do, see what she's capable of doing.
But she's demonstrably unintelligent and unknowledgeable and philosophically a communist, quite frankly.
Right.
So I'm afraid we'd be stepping from the frying pan into the fire. This next 2 months is going to be dangerous, don't you think?
Well, and that's why I said that, that Congress needs to impeach as well. I mean, you can't have, so number one, this is why the 25th Amendment is so important right now. And I understand that you're right about Kamala Harris, but we have an incompetent person with his responsibility on the nuclear football, right? I mean, this is crazy. So we can't have that. I'm not going to say that Kamala's much better, but she is at least at a level of competency that she would be, and she's elected, I guess, is the other part of this. I'm having a real difficult time saying that Kamala would be better. She wouldn't be better, but we cannot have an incompetent person in the White House right now. But this is why my second thing was we have to impeach immediately. I mean, these people, this is such a dangerous moment in history, and I want people to remember, okay, because history in the last 100 years, so this is 2024, the Bolshevik Revolution from 1924, essentially, that early 1920s, so a 100-year period of time. You look at all of the wars that we were involved in, all of the people that were killed unnecessarily in many, many cases, right? I mean, most cases. In fact, damn near all cases. I always tell people I'm not anti-war, I'm anti-stupid war. And most of them, 99% of them have been stupid. But that's only in the last 100 years. That's not that long of a period of time. So what is happening now could take us into another evolution of warfare that is much different. And we're already in it. I say that we're in this fifth generation warfare that has components of irregularness and conventional and information and physical. I mean, these different dimensions that we are currently involved in. But if it grows larger, which it could very quickly, folks, we could be in big trouble. And that's what I personally, again, speaking from Mike Flynn, I would love to be able to avoid that, and help those people that are trying to make those decisions to avoid that. But there has to be decisions made. We can't just sit here and keep talking to each other like this, or posting things on X or some other social media outlet and think that that's going to solve the world's problems. It is not.
Well, wouldn't you say that we're already actually at the cusp of what might be something resembling an actual civil war in this country, because the red people and the blue people actually can't talk to each other? They're different tribes. This is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think it's as bad as has been described by the media, the mainstream corporate woke media. I do think from the mandate, one of the things that the mandate showed for Trump's victory was a larger component of America actually believes in the kinds of things that he has spoken about, that Trump has spoken about. So I think it's not like a 50-50 thing. I think actually we've got a much smaller group of very vocal, very active leftists, communists primarily, and we have a majority of Americans that want to have frankly what I'm talking about. We want to have peace. We want to have the ability to be able to thrive as an economy. We want to be able to thrive as a country. But we want change, and we want, you know, I'll use Barack Obama's word, fundamental, but we want fundamental change, you know, taking us to a place that is based on our Constitution and not based on some communist edict that Barack Obama wanted, because that's the direction that we were heading.
Well, of course, we're absolutely right. But, you know, we did a show that analyzed the 20 points that, you know, that big fat guy, what's his name?
Moore.
Yeah, Michael Moore. Okay. So he came up with 20 things, and we checked and he was right about these things. And it turns out that on each of these 20 things, the average American is looking for more government and more benefits and so forth, so that it may be that the U.S. has been very corrupted for generations by Marxist professors in college and now in high school and now in grade school. It's going to be hard to turn around.
They're in law schools. They're in medical schools. I mean, they're in public schools. So anyway, I mean,
I know.
Listen,
yeah,
gentlemen,
I know
I'm gonna have to jump because of my time, and I want to also respect your guys' time too. And I love this kind of a conversation, and I hope that it was okay for your audience too.
It was great. I want to thank you. You gave us double the time you said you would. I really appreciate it. It's very generous of you, and hopefully we can have that longer conversation at some point. So thank you.
Yeah, think about it, and you know, you guys know how to get a hold of me, and God bless you guys and your audience, and say some prayers out there. If you have an audience that prays, pray a lot, because I tell people it's the most powerful weapon system known to man.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Have a
Mike.
great day.
God bless,
Real
guys.
pleasure.
Thank you.